We are going to start the next technical session, that is on joint ventures, business enterprise and economic cooperation. This session is to be chaired by Mr. D.P. Bagchi, former Chief Secretary of Odisha. In this session, the speakers are Professor Anoma Abhayratne from South Asian University, New Delhi, Srimati Chitra Arumugam, Principal Secretary, Department of Handicrafts, Handloom and Textile, Government of Odisha, Dr. K.C.S. Rai, Director, National Institute of Fashion Technology, Bhubaneswar. May I now request the distinguished speakers to please come to the dais. May I now request the Chairman, Mr. D.P. Bagchi, to present the memento to our Sri Lankan friends. May I now request Professor Asanga Tilakratne to please come. May I now request Professor Anoma Abhayratne. Now I leave it to Mr. Chairman to conduct the proceedings, please.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is a very important session. We are looking at possibility of joint ventures, business enterprises, economic cooperation between Sri Lanka and Odisha. So we have to cover a wide canvas. We have 3 speakers here. So I don't know who the discussants are. Ambassador Behuria. Ambassador Behuria was posted in Sri Lanka. He has done a lot of work. Our first speaker would be Ms. Chitra Arumugam, Departments of Handicrafts, Handlooms and Textiles, Government of Odisha.
My humble greetings to this very distinguished gathering. Thank you, Mr. Bagchi sir, for your very kind words of introduction. I hope I live up to it. It is my pleasure and privilege today to take you through the handlooms and handicrafts of this state, Odisha. We are in a field that is creative, constantly evolving, growing, touching boundaries where actually no boundaries should exist, shadow lines, and also a sector where the beauty of the craft is inversely proportional to the state of the livelihood of the artisans and weavers who create them. Handlooms and handicrafts of Odisha. I believe that in the unfolding drama of life, we play our roles unrehearsed. This is a typical loom, a traditional loom. Most of the clothes we wear today are spun on power looms. When we say handloom, a major part of the craft comes through work that is done by hand. A weaver sits in a pit and physically moves the loom, the warp and the weft continuously, such that your fabric is created. And a typical handloom sari of Odisha looks like this. The speciality of Odisha is ikat. Ikat simply means tie and dye. And you will also find ikat in Andhra Pradesh, in Rajasthan, in some of the other states of India. But the speciality of ikat in our state is, in Rajasthan, the fabric that you get, that is also tie and dye. Bandhani, you had heard of it. There the cloth is woven and thereafter tied and dipped in different hues. So when it's taken out, it's cloth which is tied and dipped and taken out. In Orisan ikat, it's different, even more intricate. It is not the cloth, it is the yarn, the thread. The weaver imagines the design, arranges the design in his mind's eye, brings it onto the warp and the weft, and then dips the threads in different colors. Thereafter arranges it on the loom and then weaves the magic together. Imagine, friends, we are home and we bear the cultural heritage so rich that it's my department's duty to take forward this area of Odisha's expertise. Here you see an Odisha Ikat sari and different areas of Odisha, Nuapatna and Cuttack, Bargarh towards the north, Sonpur towards the south, they have different weaving patterns, ways of doing these motifs. Again, Ikat silk saris. What I wear today is also Ikat. Outside there is a small table on which we have displayed some Ikat fabrics and some handicrafts. You can take a look at it. To the left you see a Bomkai sari, woven in district Ganjam. Bomkai has a different kind of patterns and weaves on the anchal and on the borders. On the right side you see Nuapatna single Ikat sari. If the dyeing is only of one thread, one weave of thread, it's called a single Ikat. If both the longitudinal and the horizontal is dipped in dyes and then woven, it's called double Ikat. From our traditional fabrics, we are now going into ladies' wear, men's wear, children's wear. This is just a glimpse into it. It does not cover the richness of what we have. It's merely a small glimpse into it. These are the Katki cotton saris of less fine yarn. These are saris. This is from Kotpad in Koraput, deep south. And the beauty of this is all are natural dyes, got from the root and bark of trees, owl trees. These are Kotpad fabrics, saris and scarves. This is an Ikat bedsheet. We are one of the prominent handloom weaving states of the country. Our weaves are iconic. We have the Odisha Ikat, and you will notice a star against some of the words there. That the star means that we have got a GI, Geographical Indication Certificate for that, which means weavers who weave this kind of pattern, this kind of Ikat, in particular geographical areas, are given certificates, certified, saying that they are the right weavers who are doing it. So when we bring it to the market, we highlight that this is a GI indexed sari or fabric. We have Nuapatna tie and dye saris, that's Nuapatna in Cuttack. We have Bomkai in Ganjam. We have Kotpad from Koraput. We have Barampur Joda and sari. We have Katki. And we also have Tassar, which is silk. I'll come to silk a little later. We have about 2 lakh weavers, about 40,000 households, 46,000 handlooms working, and slowly falling by the day. Our annual production right now stands around 200 crores. In the cooperative sector alone, the private sector perhaps doubles or triples this. And we have excellent craftsmanship. Across the country, where Padma Shri awards are given and Sant Kabir awards are given and national awards are given, our weavers every year come away with at least 5 or 6 of these prizes. We stand to be very proud of them. These are award-winning products by a few of our national and Sant Kabir awardees. Our strength in Odisha. We are traditionally skilled weavers, capable of producing intricate designed fabrics. We are best amongst the few Ikat producing states. What is produced on Ikat, handloom, cannot be replicated on power loom. The intricacy, the design, every single design changes. We operate as clusters and cooperatives, which means we've organized weavers into clusters and cooperatives, and from that the production base rises. We are also a traditionally tussar cocoon producing state, silk cocoons. We have geographical indications for branding, high demand in the niche market. Government supports weavers, and we also have tremendous export potential for our natural dyed, tussar and silk fabrics. This is the handloom map of Odisha. These are our major handloom. The square black squares are Ikat. Ganjam is Bomkai, Khandwa is the center, Kotpad is right down in Koraput, and Tassar is the northern belt, actually comes down like that along the forest area, and mostly done by our tribals. Our major handloom products, pockets, as I explained to you, and our products vary in cotton and silk. So we have cotton weaving, we also have silk, and we have 3 silk. Orissa is famous for Tassar silk. Our second kind of silk is Eri silk, which comes from Koraput, and our third kind of silk is mulberry silk. You would have heard of mulberry very much. We all learn it also as the silkworm and the cocoon which comes through, yeah? So south of India specializes in mulberry silk. It was not originally ours, it came from China. But we are special in 2. One is Tassar, which is our own wild cocoons, yeah, Tassar silk. And second is Eri silk. Silk is got when the cocoons, when they are ready, are dipped in boiling water, and then the yarn is reeled out. That's a usual silk in mulberry and Tassar. But Eri is an ahimsa silk. Why? Because when the cocoon is formed, the worm comes out of the cocoon, and after it comes out, only then is the silk cocoon taken and used. So it's ahimsa silk. It has a beautiful feel. Even in summer, you can wear this silk and feel cool. You feel very good. And it comes in different kinds of garmenting. So we have saris, bedsheets, scarves, stoles, home furnishing, dress materials, fabric, chadars, saris, different kind of items coming out of these base productions. And this is our institutional arrangement in Orissa. We have individual weavers. They get organized into either a primary weavers cooperative society or a self-help group, which is a smaller group, or they could operate as entrepreneurs, or they could be a master weaver. Either way, government helps across the board. And then they get formulated into an apex society. We have 2 apex societies in the handloom sector in Orissa. One is Boyanika and the other is Serifed. Boyanika, almost everyone from Orissa will be familiar with. Serifed goes by the name of Amlan for Tassar. Tassar cocoons, it brings together Tassar cooperative societies. So that's our 2 flagship organizations in the marketing area. We answer to the directorate and then to the department. At the PWCS, Primary Weavers Cooperative Society level, you must have heard of Sambalpuri Bastralia. That is one single primary weavers cooperative society that's come up so well to equal or overtake an apex society. So this is the cooperative fold in Orissa, and we try our best to do all that we can for the handlooms of Orissa. These are countries we've reached out to. The beauty about handlooms is that usually when you say export, you will say, I need 10,000 pieces, I need 20,000 pieces. But the beauty of this is that it's a creative field. It is the artisan's own way of doing things. Therefore, an artisan will not respond to you if you want 100 or 200 pieces of the same kind. You will never get another piece of the same kind. There will be some difference. It totally depends on the weaver. So now our marketing strategy is to market this as niche. Of course, there are different levels. Scarves, stoles, and running material comes with the middling level. But the high-end niche level is invariably a product which will not have a duplicate. These are our tie-ups possible with Boyanika, with Serifed, with Sambalpuri Bastralia. I'll come to it a little later. This is handloom in Orissa. I come to handicrafts. Our handicrafts sector of the state is also a rich sector. We can broadly boast about 50 crafts. Some are in a small, exist in a small manner. Sorry, I'll speak into the mic, yeah. We have 50 crafts in Orissa. We have about 1.3 lakh artisans. We have different clusters and SHGs. As I told you, the model is the same. We have artisans in the field. We have primary handicraft cooperative societies or SHGs. And then we have the apex for handicraft, which is Utkalika, who has given you a display outside. And then we have the directorate and the department. So there are 2 directorates with this department. Our annual production here is about 100 crores. And again, excellent craftsmanship. We win awards wherever we go. And this is what these are what our crafts look like. We are there in stone carving with 12,000 artisans, in natural fiber, like cane and bamboo, terracotta, applique, wood carving, Dokra, which is brass, nickel and zinc. Cane and bamboo. Silver filigree, we're well known for silver filigree. Cuttack is well known for that. Brass and bell metal. Traditional painting, that is Pattachitra. It is painting done on a special base, a cloth kind of base prepared by the artisan. And tribal jewelry from deep Navrangpur, Sonpur. Yeah. These are what our artisans create. Just a glimpse again. We have traditional products also. We go into contemporary products. Applique work. Dokra casting. Filigree, silver. Pattachitra. We have now a craft village, ethnic craft village called Raghurajpur, which government has taken up, Government of India and Government of Orissa have taken up this year. We've declared it as an ethnic craft village. And sir, we are giving Raghurajpur a loan, 10 crores. 10 crores we are investing. So the whole village becomes like a tourist destination where we can have residency programs where anyone from national and international areas can come and stay there in the village, learn about all the crafts that are going on in Raghurajpur. No, not yet. Yeah. Yeah. This is the handicrafts map of Orissa. We have groups all over Orissa. These are our usual craft pockets. Stone carving we have in Baleshwar, Mayurbhanj. Baleshwar towards the coastline, Mayurbhanj towards the north, Kyonjar towards the north, Puri, Bhubaneswar, Khurda in the center. Applique, just a few kilometers, 25-30 kilometers away from here. Dokra in adjoining districts. Filigree in Cuttack. Putter painting in the Raghurajpur I was talking to you about. Yeah. We have high export potential. Our product lines, accessories, gifts, wall decor, tabletop accessories, soft goods like furnishings, lampshades, garden accessories, jewelry, filigree and tribal. We have a high skill level, low infrastructure requirement. We have the basic raw material. We operate as clusters and cooperatives. It gives us collective bargaining power. That's the reason why cooperatives and clusters work better than individuals. We have, I've written there high, we have positive market trends. We'd like it to go higher. And obviously we have government support. And our flagship brand in the handicraft sector is Utkalika. Having taken you through handlooms and handicrafts very briefly, we were just wondering what kind of path lay ahead for us. Orissa is open to export-import. My department personally, I can guarantee that any kind of export and import collaboration you would require within what is feasible, we'll be happy to explore. I thought of a cultural exchange and a sale mechanism between our organizations. I read on the net that Lasaka is yours, if I'm pronouncing it right. So we thought of both cultural exchange. Let the Buddhist artisans go to Sri Lanka, see places and monuments there, get inspired, come back, create further. Let your citizens come here, see our people, move around, and go back and create more. We invite Sri Lanka to sponsor participants for 10th Toshali National Crafts Mela. This is it's a huge Mela happening in Bhubaneswar, 15 to 27 December. It sees a footfall of over 10 lakh people. We'll be very happy if you would like to put up a stall here. You have to sponsor your delegates, whoever come. Here, in the exhibition per se, everything is offered free. Space, electricity, everything is offered free. So we have about 300 artisans coming from all over, 300 to 400 artisans coming from all over India to participate in Toshali Crafts Mela. And even before Professor Bagchi approached me saying that we would like to hear about handlooms and handicrafts in Orissa, we were already set through Ministry of Commerce to go to Colombo. December 8th to 12th, Boyanika will represent us at the India Sourcing Fair to be held there. Ministry of Commerce is sponsoring that. So we are sponsoring a delegation from here. Boyanika will represent Orissa there. And we are present on e-commerce platforms. We've just begun. Last year we were on India Mart. This year from Jan, we are also on Amazon, Flipkart, Snapdeal, eBay, Goku, and we're trying to go further. And we're doing a lot of other things. But just to say that, not just for the delegation which has come, but also for all of us who are from Orissa itself or linked to Orissa in some way or the other, when you go near a handcrafted piece of fabric or a piece of handicraft, think of the labor that goes into it. A weaver works 4, 5, or 6 days painstakingly, 6 to 8 hours at a loom to produce just a single piece. And the single piece will obviously be priced high, much higher than the normal price. So when we look at something just once in a while, it is a celebration to that creativity that we invest in that piece and take it home to say that I am proud to be wearing something that a human being has created today. Every time I look at this group of people, I feel there's a destination, but our destination is never a place. It's only a way of seeing things in new ways. And because the youngsters are here, I can't resist, sir, please. Because the youngsters are here, and I see a number of young girls too, I just want to say, this life comes only once. Live it such that at the end of this life, you have no regrets. It does not matter if you make mistakes. But when we end our life, let it be that consciously I was present in life. Yeah, I grow into presence, I grow into attention. And every minute I have lived, 1, bringing out my best potential, and 2, I serve. Endless service. Ultimately, you see, most of us, it takes us a few decades to come to this level, to understand, and then to share this everywhere. But I believe that for all of us sitting here, we are privileged. We are much better off than the thousands and the millions who are out, who do not have the privileges we have. And for the select group which is in decision-making, powerful positions, this is my request. Every day we get opportunities. Even if we build a little on those opportunities, we are touching someone's life. Nobody will praise us. Nobody will stand by us. Let the effort not be recognized. Let us be low profile. Let us be in the background. But let that good happen somewhere there. Somewhere. I am a channel. You are a channel. We are channels. If through this, with the Sri Lankan delegation, if later you will put someone in touch with us, we, Boyanika, Serifed, Utkalika, Sambalpuri, Bastrale, and the department itself will be very happy to take it forward. Step by step. I am not promising great things because when you organize weavers, there's still things to do. But step by step, in small ways, maybe one group there with one group here. Start something like that so that not just trade, but as I said in the beginning, no shadow lines, no boundaries. I do not believe that there are countries. I do not believe that there are boundaries anywhere. We have the boundaries for practical purposes. Let them be. But let us operate as world citizens. We are too valuable to waste our lives. Thank you.
That was an outstanding presentation. Unlike my predecessor, Ambassador Mansingh, I didn't like to interrupt her flow, although she had exceeded her time. I think taking the cue from Chitra's address, the advantage that Sri Lanka has is marketing. Odisha's skills and Sri Lanka's marketing can be blended. It will be a win-win situation for both sides. I now go to our next speaker, Mr. KCS Roy. He is the director of National Institute of Fashion Technology, Orissa branch.
Odisha has a huge legacy, cultural heritage, which is reflected in our handlooms and handicrafts in a variety of ways, and we feel proud of such legacy. And when you look at the handlooms, they are so varied as depicted by ma'am in a true graphically through a picture also of the Odisha map. It is spread over all over Odisha, and the craftsmen of this traditional craft of handloom, they perform such an extraordinarily creative work that the reputation of these craftsmen, handloom and handicrafts has gone beyond the borders of the country and beyond also. I'm not going in to tell you all for people who belong to this part. What Kotpad Sonpur ma'am has already explained it and presented it with photographic things. Well, the tie and dye technique is very innovative and very also, it is a very complicated thing. In fact, I had an experience. If you can stand 30 minutes of a tie and dye artist doing the job, you will feel, what he is creating. And when you will take it, when you are going to purchase that product, and are asking for the price, then that is the experience. You will never have a second question about the price, because you remember how much of efforts, artistry, skill and technique has gone into that product. Okay, handicrafts on the other side again is quite varied. Few of the slides you saw earlier presentation, applique, filigree, gems, jewelry particularly are very, very.
Mr. Rai, excuse me, those points have been covered by her.
I'm not
So
covering.
you talk about value addition done by NIFT.
Yeah. I'm just coming to that. Actually, when you look at the export of handloom and handicrafts, well, we have been exporting mostly to the North American, European markets, and very limited to of some of the South Asian market also. And the figures are not very impressive. As you can see, 64 lakhs of exports we did in 13-14. For handlooms and handicrafts, we had around 85 lakhs. But textile figures, although it shows 10 crores, but the product components, when you look at it, ready-made garments are very limited in that. It is more of a yarn, twines, and Hessian cloth. So the product variety is limited. Now what to do? Where is the way forward? Now, this is a very challenging situation where how we can promote handlooms to the export regions. Now, recently, government has launched this India Handloom brand. India Handloom brand is something which guarantees the quality, guarantees that the product you are buying is genuine, and it also gives you assurance of that the product which you are buying has the right pricing also. So India Handloom branch was launched recently in September 7, in the day which was declared as Handloom Day for the first time in the country. And when you are looking at the Sri Lanka particularly, specifically, because I have shown earlier you could only find Sri Lanka mentioned against handicraft product, not even handlooms. Now, there is a demand increasing demand in Sri Lanka for these kind of cultural products that may be related to the Sri Lankans' rising economic prosperity, and of course the cultural linkage is there, and tourism is definitely playing its part. So we are really poised to cater to the needs of the Sri Lankan market, but we need to do a lot in that aspect. Now I will just mention three organizations who are doing a tremendous job in this area. Our own Department of Export Promotion and Marketing of Government of Odisha, HEPC is Handloom Export Promotion Council, and EPCS is Export Promotion Council for Handicrafts. Now, these are the organizations who are promoting and disseminating information to the exporters, to the manufacturers regarding handloom and handicraft products exclusively on pan-India basis. And moreover, before you start even thinking of exporting, you need to know the basics, awareness of what exporting is all about. It's just not picking up a thing and just sending some country. It is not, doesn't work like that. You need to understand the nuances of export. That includes what is the kind of demand in that market, and what kind of designing trends are prevalent in those markets, and what kind of color trends are being forecasted, and basing on this, you have to work out your products accordingly. So you need to bring the designer, the manufacturer, the exporters, and even the buyers together in some front. That is where the role of DEPM, HEPC, EPCS, these are the nodal organizations who have a huge expertise, and they have been conducting such kind of workshops, awareness camp, design development workshops also for developing products to the niche markets, specifically for the export. Now, Government of Odisha has formulated the Odisha Export Policy 2014, which came at the fag end of 2014. It is a exemplary document which has a vision document which lays down details of incentives, various kinds of facilitations, various kinds of waivers, various kinds of concessions will be offered to the exporters from Odisha. And I will just cite three important components of that government document. One is that government has formulated product identification groups. Which are the products which are identified to be exported? And there we have identified handlooms and handicrafts as very important products to be exported as per the government policy document. And that is product promotion groups have been formed at various level, right at the implementation stage, right at the regional level, and right up to district level, where the exporters have to be, awareness to be given to the exporters, and various kinds of issues, hurdles, problems to be tackled at that level, and all those committees have to finally see that the export market is accessed. So I will have a very good suggestion that that the exports who are potential exporters from Odisha must take advantage of this Government Export Policy 2014. I would like to share another information. While sifting through this data, we have just five exporters in handlooms, 6 around in handicrafts. I am talking about private sector, private entrepreneurs, and roughly about 3-4 in the textile garment sector. So it is not a very good figure when you are looking to increase your exports to niche markets, particularly even Sri Lanka. And moreover, Odisha has producers. They need to focus more on the kind of products which are more appreciated, probably more liked, probably more acceptable in Sri Lankan market, which is, I could gather some data. Basically, they are most of the home textile products, even in handlooms. So if you are looking for the handloom export, then you should focus on the home textile products like your bed linen, cotton, stable linen cloth, because cushion cover, these are, because that is what they have been importing. So unless we know this data, the products we are creating may not be that accessible there in their market. Now I am coming to the next important area, which constitutes textiles, garments and apparels. Now this is the largest manufacturing sector in South Asia, where this is the flourishing sector in South Asia, and there where the major source of employment also and earnings, foreign exchange earning potential is there. Now this sector also provides employment to a huge labor force of 50 million direct, 55 million and 90 million of indirect employment in this particular garment, textiles and apparel sector. And in spite of the scope of specialization, this sector, India and Sri Lanka trade is very limited. Now, I would like to say, we must look, when we are looking for the export, we must look where we specialize and where to target market, what is their specialization in the context of Odisha and Sri Lanka and Indo-Sri Lanka. Now, what is the strengths of India? India is basically more known for cotton knit, women stuffs, blouse and skirts, embellished, embroidered products, fine gauze yarn, and that itself constitutes 44% of total textile export from India. So these are the 4-5 products that constitute 44% of the total exports India is making in textile and garment sector. And when we look at the Sri Lankan side, we say that basically their strength is they produce very high value added products, and that basically focus on intimate wear, lingerie. As you can see, they are the second largest exporter of producer of brassiers, and this is 10% market share they have in the US and European market. And swimwear is again comes under intimate wear also. That is again one area where they are much ahead, and 8% market share to the world market of USA and Europe market. And they are more skilled in formal wear. Formal wear as well as blends. Blends means mixing of different yarns, both man-made and natural. So that is where their strength is. And these 3-4 intimate wear, lingerie, and formal wear, they constitute 30% of their exports. Now, Sri Lankan strength basically is they are the world's #1 sourcing for world brands. That means the brands which we see around, they actually source their products from Sri Lanka. And that includes some of the legendary brands like Victoria's Secret, Gap, Lands' End, Land Brand, Mark Spencer, Nike and all. There are many other brands. So their reputation is built on basically fundamentals of the industry, where the quality of the product, high quality value added products they create, and their apparel sector is very maturing so fast. It is much more ahead. And they have a business culture which is more socially responsible, more environmental friendly, more eco-friendly and sustainable. And there is a rising competition but Sri Lanka maintains its edge through its quality and value addition. So now there is a scope that we can come for some kind of a agreement collaboration where we will try to take advantage of the both countries' strength. And based on that, we can think of the investment probably in a joint sector or a direct investment. I will just cite 2 of the legendary brands which have made a name in the world. One is Brandix, one is Mass Holdings. Now, Brandix is one brand where it is one of these largest South Asian brands, and they have started a facility in Visakhapatnam with a 1,000 acre of land and $750 million investment, and it has come as Brandix India Apparel City. It is an apparel city where you have end-to-end integration, fiber to store, and with one-stop shop. And they are developing a market for all the brands, international brands. They are the sourcing. They are producing from fiber to shop. And those kind of core strengths which Sri Lanka have, they are, it is reflected in the Brandix BISE Visakhapatnam, that they do everything from thread to product. That is where Sri Lanka has a strength. So I would say that such kind of brands like Brandix, and another is Mass Brands. Mass Brand is another legendary Sri Lankan sourcing agency that also caters to the various international brands. Mass Brands has already set shops in some of the Indian states like Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, and also Andhra Pradesh. And they are also equally very professional, and they have a 1.2 billion industry which is catering to the market for the other brands. Now, what I will be emphasizing here, particularly for our Sri Lankan business, that why should you invest in Odisha? What is so big about Odisha? That is what I will try to emphasize here. Now, Odisha, as you know, is a absolutely stable, able leadership we have got. There is a consistency in the policies of the government, and that is itself is a USP of Odisha. And coming to that, we have already attracted 15.4 billion of USA investment which is there, and that constitutes 18% share of the total investment in India Odisha is attracting. That is where Odisha is known to be a investor friendly destination. Yeah, thank you. And we have a GDP is going very fast, and although we have a mineral rich state, and of course we know that doing ease of business in Bhubaneswar is very, it is very convenient. It is also known as educational hub. Now, why textile sector? Now, textile sector in Odisha is so rich. You see that we have a huge production of cotton. Odisha is producing so much of cotton, and there is scope of producing
Please conclude.
textiles sector.
Please conclude, Mr. Raj.
Yes, sir. It is done. it is done. And we are also going to for integrated textile parks, so that can be taken advantage of. And I would expect investment of Sri Lankan, particularly just textile and clothing manufacturers to have a look at the Odisha and see it is still a very industry-friendly destination for their investment. And the last slide indicates that NIFT, you can see Boita the thing, that is what we had, NIFT had designed for Odisha Pavilion last year, which won a medal for the Odisha for the first time. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Rai. I have great pleasure in inviting Professor Hanoma Abhayratna from the South Asian University, New Delhi. She is a Sri Lankan national, but currently she is working in Delhi.
I'm going to talk about trade relations between, I'm supposed to talk about trade relations between Odisha and Sri Lanka. Many presenters looked at the historical linkages between Kalinga-Lanka trade relations. In mine, I look at the current situation. What are the relations? State level time series data on trade between Odisha and Sri Lanka were not available to me. Therefore, my presentation is on trade relations between India and Sri Lanka. Through that, I'm expecting to see the prospects of trade between Odisha and Sri Lanka. We all know that between India and Sri Lanka, we had a very strong trade relations. Those strong trade relations existed before pre-colonial time, were weakened to some extent during the colonial period. After gaining independence, both countries were very much interested in renewing those relations. But due to the inward-looking economic policies adopted by both countries during that time, the trade relations between Sri Lanka and India were not very strong in 70s, 80s, until 1990, I can say. Sri Lanka was the first South Asian country that adopted trade liberalization policy. It was a rather hesitant process by the region that time. Sri Lanka adopted liberalization policies in 1977. After some time, India launched its own program. That's also in 1991. And that was followed by the entire region. Since then, regional integration of different forms started taking effect, like bilateral trade, multilateral, bilateral, regional, sub-regional liberalization. SAARC, the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation, was established in 1985. That was that can be seen as the first earliest attempt in economic cooperation in the region. This was followed by the establishment of SAFTA in 1995 and SAFTA in 2006. Both India and Sri Lanka are members of BIMSTEC, the Bay of Bengal Initiative for Multisectoral Technical and Economic Cooperation. This is a multilateral free trade agreement aimed at achieving its own free trade area by 2017. The Indo-Sri Lanka trade agreement, it was signed in 1998. It can be considered as an pioneering attempt at economic cooperation in South Asia, and began with liberalization of trade in goods. By signing this trade agreement, Sri Lanka expect to increase trade ties with the South Asian giant, India, and to change the Sri Lankan export profile from low value added goods to high value added goods, to provide low income groups with cheaper consumer imports from India, and to attract more export-oriented foreign direct investment from third countries by promoting itself as an effective entry point into the Indian market. Since liberalization of trade in India, trade between two countries began to pick up. In 93, between 93 and 96, there was a doubling of two-way trade. And between 90 to 96, imports of Indian goods to Sri Lanka grew by 556%. In 1995, India replaced Japan as the largest source of imports to Sri Lanka, accounting for 8 to 9% of total imports. Now it is much higher than that. Indo-Sri Lanka Free Trade Agreement, though it was signed in 1998, it became operational in 2000. Sri Lanka's trade with India, it changed dramatically in the early years, with the number of products being exported from, with the increase of not only trade in goods and services, but the number of products. You can see that since 2000, how imports are given in red and blue is exports, how they have increased. I think imports were increased by 10 times since 2000.
Professor, what is that year when there was very high imports?
That is 2011.
Any reason, particular reason why it is so high?
That may be, this was the end of the war,
Okay.
and the Sri Lankan economy started growing again. So I'm showing separately. These are the exports to India. It has increased dramatically, and again imports. It is not only the value of trade between the two countries that has increased over the years, the number of products exported to Sri Lanka, exported by Sri Lanka to India also has increased dramatically. There is a significant, that is very important, there is a significant change in the nature of products traded from primary products to higher value-added products. You can see that before 2000, it was only primary products that exported by Sri Lanka, like paper, waste and scrap steel, areca, dried fruit, cloves. After 2000, we are exporting more high value-added products like insulated wires and cables, intimate garments, animal feed, refrigerators and freezers, ceramic, furniture, bedding, mattresses, etc., tableware, machinery, natural rubber and rubber products. Imports from India. India has been the number one source of import since liberalization. Now it accounts for about 20% of Sri Lanka's imports. Mainly we import petroleum and petroleum products, vehicles, sugar, cotton, iron and steel, pharmaceutical products. The rapid growth in imports to Sri Lanka, imports from India, was not necessarily a result of the free trade agreement signed between the two countries. Sri Lanka was importing goods from India for a long time, even prior to the signing of this agreement. Even after the agreement, most of the imports from India, such as motor vehicles, petroleum products, paper products, are in the negative list. That is, they are not getting any concessions. So imports under free trade were only about 14%. The point I'm trying to make here is, even without those free concessions or agreements, trade between two countries can grow. Overall trade between two countries since 1997 suggests a positive picture. with overall trade growing close to sixfold and exports from Sri Lanka growing tenfold. Increased diversity and greater value addition in exports from Sri Lanka is a positive development. It is not trade in goods that has improved between two countries, trade in services, especially tourism. India has become the Sri Lanka's biggest market for tourist arrivals. Now it is 20% of total number of tourists coming to Sri Lanka. Since 2000, tourist arrivals from India has grown rapidly. Sri Lanka is India's fifth largest country for tourist arrivals. As we already discussed, pilgrimage is the main reason. As a percentage, Sri Lankan tourists coming into India is 3.5%, but if we take it in absolute numbers, it's a very large number. It outnumbers the Indians visiting Sri Lanka. Trade in services, health and education. Unfortunately, this has developed as only one-way transaction. There are many Sri Lankan students come to India for higher education. Mainly they go to Bangalore. And number of people come in for medical treatments, and it has also increased significantly over years. So we have many possibilities in education and health sector. Investment. Sri Lanka has become an attractive destination for Indian foreign direct investment. You can see that these are the top 5 investors in Sri Lanka. USA first, UK second, Singapore, Hong Kong, after that it's India. 6.5% of FDI received by Sri Lanka from India. And over half of Indian investment in SAARC region are located in Sri Lanka. So we are already doing very well. Indian investment in Sri Lanka also increased rapidly after 2000. Indian foreign direct investment in service sector, that is 63%, is due to fast growth in investment in health, education, fuel distribution, hotel industry, tourism, IT training, software and professional services. Sri Lankan investment in India, it's very small. It includes furniture, food manufacturing and hotel services, and he presented about investment by garment industry. From that, if we look at what are the prospects for trade between Odisha and Sri Lanka, in history, according to 6th century AD sources, Kaling exported rice, precious stones, fine textiles and other daily necessities to Ceylon. And in return, Kaling imported elephants, areconuts, cinnamon, etc. from Ceylon. Now the picture has changed completely. From the sources that I found, Odisha export, the list in the left, metasurgical products, engineering, chemical and allied mineral products, agriculture, forest products, marine, handloom, handicraft, textile, pharmaceutical products, electronics, software, service providers. Now Odisha export metasurgical products, engineering, chemical and allied those products, pharmaceuticals, writing and printing papers, tires, tubes and plaques to Sri Lanka. So there is scope for improving trade between Odisha and Sri Lanka. Also, there is scope for investment in Sri Lanka in sectors such as telecommunication, oil, construction, hospitals, software, rail transport, etc. At the moment, Sri Lanka is growing at a satisfactory level, and there are many development projects. So investments, after seeing the end of the war, there is a very good situation for investors, and there are many encouragements for them. There is also scope for mutual cooperation in sectors such as tourism and audiovisual and cultural services. In the case of tourism, Odisha can attract Sri Lankan tourists on pilgrimage. We discussed that in the previous session, and it was Ramesh said that we need a place for worship, and the need of a living shrine was mentioned. With the understanding of the minds of those who come on pilgrimage, I think it will be a very good starting point if you can construct a Buddhist temple where Buddhist monks can live. That will provide those people, religious tourists, some sort of mental security and belonging to this place. I think it will be a good starting point. For tourism, India, Orissa can, Sri Lanka can jointly attract tourists from other countries. As a package, they can come to Odisha, and part of that, after that, they can go to Sri Lanka and visit those places. So if we can prepare some packages, we can attract tourists from other countries other than Sri Lanka and other parts of India. In social sectors such as health and education, as I said before, India is an important destination of Sri Lankan patients and students. Odisha can explore the possibilities of attracting them. Why many students go to Bangalore, not to Odisha?
We have a session on that in the afternoon.
Yes.
We have a session.
Okay. At the moment, there are a large number of students going to the West. If we can attract them towards here, it will be beneficial to both parties. For Sri Lanka can save a lot from that. Cost will be much less. And there is a significant movement of professionals between the two countries in health, software, architecture, engineering, services, etc. This points out that Sri Lanka could gain from skill and technology transfer from India. Yesterday I already talked to Mr. Bachi and asked when we visited Mindtree, can't Sri Lankan come here and get these skills? Okay, with that. Okay, I finished my presentation here. I thank Kalinga Foundation for giving me this opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Anuma Abhayratnam. You made very important points. One of the points that you made appealed to me the most, that is a joint tourism package, including both Sri Lanka and Odisha. I now request Professor Ambassador Avasar Bevria to give his comments.
When we talk of Kalinga and Sri Lanka bilateral relationship, trade and investment, we have to think also what changes have taken place, particularly after globalization and liberalization. Now, having said that, when we talk about what we can do bilaterally between Kalinga and Sri Lanka, we have to take into consideration also that we are parties to other international pacts like SAFTA, like Asia Pacific Trade Agreement, and also, as Professor Abhayratna said, the Bay of Bengal initiative. All these things simultaneously discussions are taking place on trade and investment. So we have to see how to converge, how to blend all our efforts within the broader framework, because the world has become flat, as you know, you very rightly emphasized. So having said that, my limited experience as a commercial representative of Government of India, as a very young diplomat in 3 leading India's trade partners, Japan and United States of America, I have realized that 2-3 things are very important. Without that, whatever you may say, nothing will move. International trade is determined by three factors. Apart from demand and supply, or the preference, as Mr. Ray said, you see, the first thing is the quality must be ensured. Price must be competitive. Third, the delivery schedule should be adhered to. So whatever we do, if we want to play jointly in an international market, and we have to think in those terms, because otherwise only Kalinga Sri Lanka trade investment has a very limited scope. If we want to do that, these three things have to be remembered very much. I don't think in Kalinga or the present Odisha, we are very careful about this. So those three things you must take care of. Now, coming to the other points, that what we can offer, or what Sri Lanka can offer to Kalinga, or what we both can do to have a niche in the international trade and investment. You see, we are talking many factors like tourism and other areas, but there are few areas which is in this leaflet but is not being discussed, is that about the precious stones, whether we can jointly do anything about it. Now, for the information of the Sri Lankan delegates, I say that whatever precious colored stones you find in Sri Lanka, whether it is rubies or whether it is tourmaline, whether it is aquamarine or cat's eye, all these things are also available in Odisha, in the western districts of Kalahandi, Nuapada and things like that. But unfortunately, we have not mined them properly, and we have no idea how to process them. As a result, the entire trade is now not in the regular organized way being managed. So I think we can have some of your experiences how to develop these mines and how to process them, and with your help we can probably go to the international market, and they are of very good quality, I can assure you. The second thing I find also on the agriculture, there is no mention of agriculture, what we can do in the field of agriculture between Kalinga and Sri Lanka. So take for example, we have failed in Kalinga, in Odisha, about the tea production, coffee production. Now you have a very, very vast experience how to manage those tea gardens and coffee gardens, manage them and also market them internationally. I think it is an area which the Odisha administration also to think how to get some investment from Sri Lanka in this field and see their expertise, their experience, how to market them internationally also can be taken up. So these are the two areas which I thought is, though not has been emphasized, we should think of it, because Sri Lanka has the expertise, Sri Lanka has the experience, and they are doing very well internationally, both in gems and jewelry and also in tea and coffee. I think this is one of the major source of income for Sri Lanka. I'm talking of 30 years back. I think it still continues along with the tourism.
Plantation sector is important.
It is there. Now the other sector that people talked about, education and health. These are the areas, well, it is good, we can think of it. But if I remember correctly, I think the Sri Lankan students and the elite families, they look to the West always. They always like to go to Oxford, Cambridge, and particularly UK rather than America. So to compete in that sector, to bring their attention to Odisha or India requires two things. One, we must also improve the quality of our higher education in India, which I'm afraid we are not reached that point which can meet your requirements in this. But this is an area worth proving into and probably do. The other thing which I'm sure now, despite some improvements in the health sector in Sri Lanka, but a lot of Sri Lankan people come also for medical treatments and training here. I think this is a field also which we should explore and see if there are more Sri Lankan medical tourists, they say, can come to Odisha, because Odisha has now reasonably good quality of medical facilities available. So also in the education we can think of it. Now the other thing, a little more in the broader sense, in the Indo-Sri Lanka bilateral trade after liberalization, when we signed this bilateral agreement in 2000, the total bilateral trade was probably 500 million or so. Now the last statistics just before coming here, I was seeing that it has reached almost 4 billion or so. But it is also a little bit of one-sided. We probably, this bilateral trade, India's share probably more than 70% or so. So this forum should also think how to bring little more balance and try to see what we can do through investment and value to produce value-added products in Sri Lanka, and then go to international market. So that, because whether we like it or not, at one stage, this will create a problem. Maybe there is an imbalance in the bilateral trade. So we have to see many other aspects to see that how there can be more investment, Indian investment in Sri Lanka, and produce value-added things and go for international market, because I know because of the Sri Lankan brand in certain areas is universally acceptable, particularly in the very developed countries and things like that. This can be taken advantage, and I think the entrepreneurs from Odisha can also think in what are the areas we can go ahead to this. So there is the other thing, I think in that bilateral trade there are 4,000 products which is duty free, which can come from Sri Lanka to India. I don't know, I don't have the details, but one has to see what are the products that can still come here, and we can probably do value add, and we can probably re-export on all those things. So these are the areas I think we should think very seriously, and the new 2 areas what I have said. And about the tourism, as I was hearing this many presentations here. Now there are tourism, there are 2-3 factors. What has to be kept in view anywhere in the world? First is the connectivity, which each one of you have emphasized it. Secondly, there should be very clean, reasonably affordable, good accommodation, because it is a wrong thing people to think that all tourists are very rich tourists and they need golf course and 5-star hotel. Third and most important, which I think in the tourism from Sri Lankans, the Odisha government and the people of Odisha should learn, is most important factor for any tourism is the local population should be tourist friendly. And on that, I think the Sri Lanka's expertise we can obtain and see this tourism, which is a vast scope, and where both Sri Lanka and Kalinga can work together. And the same as in Sri Lanka, the tourism has changed the face of economy of that country. It can be repeated in India. Thank you very much.
Point that Professor Abhayaratnam made was that Western education is very costly. For 1/4, 1/5 of that cost, similar education can be imparted here. India, the average standard may not be comparable to the average of the Western countries, but we have centers of excellence which provide international standard education at 1/5 to 1/6 of the cost. That was the basic point which was made. And we have a full session on that. May I request Ambassador Mansingh to wind up on my behalf, shall I say.
This is the most important session in this entire 2-day program, because we often get lost with our sentimental memories of the past. but actually we have to look at the present and the future. And this gave us that opportunity to release ourselves from sentiment and say, what can we do that can be a benefit to the young people here and to the succeeding generations. Now, Ambassador Beuria gave me that opening that I was looking for. I want to be the resident critic, because usually in these seminars, everybody wants to make you feel good. Everything is fine, we are doing everything all right. And I was inspired by Chitra's presentation. She had missionary zeal, which was infectious. Mr. Ray gave about all the positive things that the government has done. Professor Abhay Ratna talked about the trade agreements and all that. The question I have to raise is, and forgive me for looking at the glass half empty and not half full. The question I'm asking is, you've got the infrastructure in place, all the government policies are good. We have a SAFTA agreement under which the whole of South Asia has a free trade agreement. We have a free trade agreement specifically with Sri Lanka. And now early next year, India and Sri Lanka are planning to sign yet another agreement to broaden the area of cooperation and make it easier. And with all this, I want you to ask the question, why is our trade limited to $4 billion for a people with a population of $1.2 billion, an economy that is growing at 7.5%? Why is it that with an important neighbor so close to us, our trade is only about $4 billion? That's the question we have to ask. Also, we are not looking at the challenges we have. Why is it that when we talk of textiles, we say, look how beautiful our stuff is, and of course you must buy them. I want you to understand, when you talk to Sri Lanka, you are talking competition. Whether it is textiles, whether it is tourism, whether you are talking about other products like tea, for instance. You raised the issue of tea. Why should the Sri Lankans encourage you to produce tea which will affect them in the markets? My lesson from all this is, learn from Sri Lanka. And there's a lot of things we can learn from smaller countries which have often beaten us in many sectors. I've just come back from Israel, where I know that the Israelis have technologies which are way ahead of anything that we have in. And we are approaching Israel to tell us, give us your secrets on how you do irrigation, how you do desalinization and recycling of water. And similarly, I think there are things that we need to learn from Sri Lanka. Let me therefore, because of the shortage of time, just specify some of the areas where I think this cooperation is going to be productive, provided we approach it with humility and learn lessons from Sri Lanka. Firstly, so far as handicraft, handlooms are concerned, yes, we have great products. But believe me, as a consumer, I go to Colombo and buy shirts. I come to Bhubaneswar, I also buy handloom shirts. But my handloom shirts in Bhubaneswar, although they are very reasonably priced, don't last for more than 1 or 2 seasons, because the size never fits, the fabric shrinks, the colors run, and therefore you have to abandon it. I get a shirt from Sri Lanka, it's beautifully cut, it's fashionable, it's got a tremendous export market. So here is my suggestion. The handloom producers here should be guided to look at the service products of the Sri Lankans, how they have channelized their energies and their skills into producing products that are state of the art, that the major apparel producers of the world are sourcing it from Sri Lanka and making Sri Lanka a major textile exporter, which is beating us at the game. This is number one in textiles. And let's not forget, we also face competition from other states. Brandex has come to Visakhapatnam with a $1 billion investment. We need to be aware that next door there is a major investment, and no matter how much you talk about the great facilities we have, you're not being as smart as the state next door. So what do? I think we should join them. If you can't beat them, just join them. Let us go and join Visakhapatnam, set up feeder channels from here so that we can be part of the process. That's textiles and crafts. The other is jewelry. A matter has been raised. Sri Lanka is globally famous for its gems and jewelry. India, and particularly Odisha, is famous for its filigree. why can't we marry the two skills? The skills of our artisans with the products that Sri Lanka produce. They have a global market. We have not even captured the Indian market. There is second thing. A third area is services, tourism. Why are they such a tourist-friendly country? Why do they receive so many tourism? And ask the question, for 400,000 Sri Lankan tourists, mostly Buddhist pilgrims, come to India. Less than 400 come to Odisha. We talk about great Buddhist heritage. Why can't we get this? Now, of course, the infrastructure is improved. We are getting direct flights. But let us see, is our private sector, is our government equipped to take advantage of the opportunities we have? I don't think we have realized in Odisha that tourism can be a source which can provide employment while giving you a higher GDP. Now, let's look at manufacturing. We haven't even scratched the surface. Odisha is one of the major sources of primary products like iron ore, bauxite, manganese. You name it, Odisha has got it. And we have steel plants, we have aluminum plants, we have a global market. Why not we engage Sri Lanka and maybe set up dedicated facilities where Sri Lanka has certain needs for a product? Fifth is what about the port structure and maritime infrastructure? As I mentioned yesterday, Sri Lanka has just built, with Chinese assistance, a major port called Hambantota. Hambantota is a state-of-the-art port which is there, ready and lying idle. We have very busy ports set up in Paradip and Dhamra, and we are now setting up a port in Gopalpur. Why don't we combine our expertise and our capacities and make sure that together we service the rich Southeast Asian market and the East Asian market? There is a possibility there. So finally what I say is, the government has declared a look east policy, and Mr. Modi says, don't just look east, act east. And when he says east, it is really as far as you can go in the east. Because when Mr. Narasimha Rao made the look east policy in 1992, for him look east meant Southeast Asia. When Mr. Vajpayee became Prime Minister, he extended look east to Japan, Australia and South Korea. When Mr. Modi says, when I look east, I see the western shores of the United States. So our horizon is expanding. Our market is expanding. We are growing at 7.5%. But we need to get ourselves into the globalized economy that Ambassador Beuria has suggested. We have a tough competition, but we also have opportunities. And I think the seeds of this discussion should be carried forward in more detailed discussions. Thank you.
I had requested Professor Mansingh to deliver the presidential address on my behalf. So the job has been done. We have several takeaways from this seminar, particularly for this session. It needs close follow-up in a sustained manner. We need a forum for that, or maybe we'll have to articulate these thoughts at the appropriate fora in Sri Lanka, at Government of India, in Government of Odisha. So this is just the beginning, this is not the end. And as Ambassador Mansingh, Ambassador Beuria also mentioned this point, the world is now integrating. There is nothing like a local production now. All production has to be for the global market. So there the standards of quality come, delivery schedules come, packaging comes, marketing comes. This whole thing comes in a globalized manner. So now we have to think in global, our mindset has to become global. So we need to upgrade ourselves everywhere. But just a small comment on handlooms. When you buy a Kanjivaram sari, when you buy a Banarasi silk sari, when you buy a khadi product, as Chitra said, it's a work of art. With human hands, the product has been created. It can never compete with the manufacturing sector. Having said that, I must also add that quick point which Ambassador Mansingh said, our dyes should be fast, they should not run, they should be cost effective. We will have to balance both these factors. So I am very grateful to the learned panelists who have provoked us into thinking in terms of joint ventures, in terms of collaborations. With this, may I announce that lunch is ready. Thank you very much.